Everyone, Eggman here with another video, and today we have a top 32 breakdown for the launch event for the Battle Spirit Saga card game here in North America. It was over 400 players playing at this, and I was one of them, but you won't see my lists in the top 32 here or my name. But I will say, if you guys did appreciate all the hard work that went into making this video and all the lists and everything else, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. All of these lists are on my website, Eggman Events, which is linked in the description, as well as all of my other kind of Battle Spirit Saga event coverage and deck lists and everything else. So I think it's a really good resource for that. And for real, like, this took a lot of work to make sure that all the lists I got were the paper deck lists, not even the photos. So because there weren't any photos, so I had to make sure that all those got transcribed to bss.gg and then hosted onto my website and get all that kind of spackled up. And it took a lot of work for this video, I promise. And so I really would appreciate those like and subscribes. And also I do want to shout out to for both Yomi for helping me put some of these deck lists in, as well as Chris Norcross and also my boy George for getting top 32 here. He was doing really well at this event too. I know he's been grinding this game a lot. He's making a lot of content as well. Highly recommend you guys check him out. He also did his own kind of interview for his top 32 and just his event experiences. So highly recommend checking him out as well. And I just thank you guys for all the support. I really do appreciate it. Anyways, actually going into this breakdown, looking at these top 32 archetypes, and I also have to say that they're a little bit loosey-goosey because this is a card game where the archetypes aren't really defined as best as like other card games. So I used my best judgment for it. I think I did a pretty good job. If there's anything that you guys think was mislabeled or needs to be labeled as something else, let me know and I'll try to change it if I think I agree with you. But that's kind of how the way it is for this. But going into it, we did have 8 red Terrasaur aggros, 7 Siegwurm Nova decks, 6 white controls with while I'm taking it, 3 of the purple soul control, as I kind of say it, 2 yellow Fabled beasts, 2 white aggros, 1 purple curse, 1 purple aggro, a purple red curse deck, which is really interesting, and a red Nebula dragon as well. So that's kind of how I broke up the archetypes for these events. But I highly implore that you guys check out these deck lists individually as well. Some of them are kind of techy and different from the other ones, but with 32 lists in this top cut, I had to make some choices of which ones I want to cover in this video and not. So in general, we're going to be covering the top placing deck in each one of these archetypes, and we're just going to start off right now. So we're going to go to this first place list. This is Austin Summers' first place white control list. And Austin is a local for me, so I was able to get an interview with him. He's on the channel as well, and do some games on my Twitch stream as well. So you guys can check that out if you want. There's definitely a reason why he won this event. He's very strong in this card game, and he definitely has a lot of thoughts that kind of go into not only doing, playing this deck, but just kind of deck building around it. And I should have said this a second ago, but we're only covering the main decks just because of how it is. If you guys want to check out the side decks, go for it. Honestly, some of these side deck choices, I don't know what they're for a lot of these decks. A lot of people have like their own specific counters they're trying to get with these side decks. And so those are kind of just more of a rule of thumb, and just how bss.gg works, we can't have a side deck natively with it. So I had to make it's pretty much 64 lists, right? Half of them are just 10 cards and stuff, but that's what the main deck's kind of side deck board is. And sorry, that has to be kind of on different side, different lists. They couldn't be integrated. I'm sure they're going to be fixing that in the future. But anyways, going to this one, this is a really obnoxious deck that you have to play around. The Fortress, the Elephant's so good in this deck, and just in general in white. I think that was one of the big things I learned from this weekend is this is a really good card. It's very strong. I was even siding it at 2 or 3, and even in like my janky little purple deck, just saying, you know what, let's just play this on turn 8 for 8. Your opponent just like stops what they're doing, like, oh my gosh, do I really want to give them 3 and 3? And they really don't want to, but they really don't have anything like to stop them from doing that. So it's such a quirky little thing to do, and I love doing it. So, but in general, just the idea of this deck is to just be very defensive. Obviously, a lot of people have kind of different philosophies for their builds, and honestly, there's still a lot of diversities between these decks and stuff too, which is, I think, one of the coolest thing about this game is that even if the archetype is the same, that there's a lot of different ways to go down the same road, which is really neat. So. There's not much more I kind of want to go into. I do say like Buffalong Bill is a choice ad for this, but I think a lot of people were kind of finding success with it too, and I think it was a really cool little build there too. So I do like this build and what it accomplished as well. And I do also kind of want to mention another list as well. I do want to go over Jesse's list, the teammate of Austin's as well. And it's kind of not like a white control list. It's pretty close to it, but he kind of described it as a kind of more tempo list too. So it is a little bit different for what you're trying to accomplish. There are a lot of cards that are the same that you'll see, but kind of like on the higher end, like the elephant, like the Buffalong Bills, like the elk, and also, but there's none of the armored dragon ship Enterprise 2, which I think is probably the most obnoxious card in the game. Once you are able to get this on the board, it just gets so much protection. It's so hard to remove, and there's just like not a good, especially like this with Fulla, at least in purple, there's like nothing you can do about it. It's just like 100% protected, and like there's like sometimes you can use Confront to get around it, but Snowflake gets out of it. But this is not that build. This is this build here, and this one's just more of getting those tempo plays, of being able to establish cards, being able to probably establish and proc some elephants for some extra damage, and just kind of being a little bit obnoxious. So not as much as like the control aspect. This is more tempo. I labeled it white control. If you guys really want me to make it white tempo, I'll do it too. But it's very like white was kind of trickier to differentiate, I think, between other archetypes, especially because like the high ends for a lot of these are mostly the same. It's just kind of like the mid-range stuff that's a little bit different. But this is Jesse's list. Congrats again for him for this top 4. Almost had the teammates fight in the finals. Very, very close there. But again, congrats there. Anyways, going into our next list, this is our second place list. This is Alex Blandin's list, who I also did an interview with. It's on the channel too, if you guys want to see his direct thoughts of the deck. In general, though, if you want the sum up, is that this deck is the best deck in the game in his mind. And I tend to agree that it is very, very good. There's a lot of them that got into this top cut 8, and they're more or less the same build. All of them are very, very similar builds to this. This is probably of all of the archetypes, this was like the easiest one to kind of identify in linear eyes as this is the same deck or same kind of archetype. And it's just crazy how much pressure like this deck can do, how fast it can be, and just honestly how efficient it can be for this. I would say the key cards are definitely Giganorex. Bearded Eagle is also just very good, coincidentally. It just has like the good stat lines and what you want for it, and just everything else that goes with it, which is really nice. And it just happens to be an Emperor Beast, which is great for your Giganorex. And that's really it. And I think Scorched Battlefield and the Trooper, and honestly, this deck is really good at just getting attacks with some big power boys, and being able to get some damage, and then also being able to use the Confront from the Rex in case there's anything that's kind of in your way, which is also, I think, a really, really good form of removal for this deck too. So very great, very strong, and I think very consistent too. Again, I played this deck for the first time, and I'm like, I can see why there's power for this. This deck just seems like it's on a different level than most of the other decks I've been playing at the moment. So this is definitely a really, really good like first build for anyone trying to get into the game and just do kind of well, because it's a little bit linear for what it is, but it's, again, very, very strong. So again, congrats to Alex for their finish there. Next up, we have Xander with their top 8 Nova. And I think Nova was probably the most popular deck run at this event, strictly because of the idea that this was like the poster child for the first set and kind of like the poster child for the card game in a lot of ways. And honestly, Nova is just like a really, really strong card. So that really helps. The fact that it does, a board clear, the fact that it does, like it heals you too, like, I mean, it's just very obvious. As soon as you see what this card's effect does and you realize this card exists in the game, like it's just really, really clear. Like, oh, well, I just use this to pop it when I'm at 2, and then I heal all the way back up, and then I have all these extra these cores to work with, and then I also have a big boss monster that I got for cheap, especially with the inclusion of Big Bang Energy, right? So it makes really sense to me. I think a lot of other people, especially since this is like the launch event for the game, this was something that was very kind of understood. It was just like the deck that if you didn't want to do like something creative, you're like, well, all these pieces work together anyway, so just kind of use that as my core and then choose some extra cards from there. But I also will say, like, this is a spicier build. Like the 4 of the Baculus in the main is honestly a really, really strong tech for this deck. The fact this just kind of helps initiate board clears a lot of the ways, because it puts everything to 1. And it just happens that this happens to be a 6 cost, which means that for the Ascend effect, you can just, it's 6 or more, right? So it doesn't care what color you are. You can play Baculus, and then you can go into your Siegwurm Nova. That's essentially going to be a board clear, because everything's going to go down to 1 core, and which means that they're going to have like just very, they're all going to be level 1, which means that it's going to be 10k is like what, 4 or 5 cards pretty easily most boards. So that's very strong. It's a really good combo to help you get into the game. And honestly, like all of like the protections that white have, Baculus is great for removing them. And I would not be like siding in Full as facing against a red deck most of the time either. And I do know he does run the Curse Dragon in the side, so if you really want to go for the Wombo combo, you can definitely do that with this. So that's something available for you as well, but a really, really cool deck too. I think Nova is not going to go anywhere. A lot of people are going to keep playing it, and the fact that it was like the second most popular archetype in this probably lends a little bit to just how popular I think the deck was at the event in the first place, but also just to just how strong this deck is in general. So congrats there to Xander for their finish. And then next up we do have this is Admassu's Yellow Fabled Beast, and we're going to go over both Yellow Fabled Beasts just because they're the only yellow decks in this top 32, which is a little bit of a shame, but I also, to some extent, understand why. I think yellow is probably the most undertuned color between everything, especially since it doesn't have any of the, like the card, like its good magic card that I got in the set, Royal Potion, isn't even like used very often. It's not even used in this deck, right? It's not as flexible as like Star Blessed Draw, Burning Force, Core Theft, or like even Absolute. Like these are just like generically just better kind of cards for it, and I don't think anything, there's like one angelic magic card that I think some people tech in. I teched into my side, but by and large yellow was not really present at this event, and that's kind of a shame. But going into this list specifically, it's really an interesting kind of deck. It revolves around the Fabled Beast. So Phantasmal Paradise, when you summon a Fabled Beast, you may draw Exhaustless Nexus to draw a card, so essentially a once per turn draw. And also being able to give everything plus 1k can be impactful too. Most things here are, there's just a lot of Fabled Beasts, and I do like the kind of the tech for white where you are running the Newman Guard is also the Enterprise. Both these cards are really obnoxious for what they are and kind of either help you get some ramp and draw, which is nice, or the fact that this card like just protects everything, all your weenies from getting popped or destroyed, and that's actually really important in this deck. Even though this is kind of expensive or to get out for a turn, the fact that it sticks on the board and then generically means that your opponent has to put a lot of resources to get rid of is just worth. It's just both these cards kind of do the same thing. They do cost 8 plus an additional core in this deck because you can't have any cost reductions, but once you hit the board with them, your opponent just it kind of has to give you a lot of value for them or play differently because of it, which I think is impactful. Other than that, I think this is pretty Exhaust Nexus is also a really, really good card. If you use 2 of them, you get rid of like a lot of cards. It doesn't target, and it's yellow, and there's only like 1 card with armor yellow in this game, and not a lot of people are running it. So I think this is just something you do have to be wary of against playing against yellow. This is probably the good board clear that not a lot of other colors get, especially since it's non-targeting board clear, which is really important there too. So, and you get to do it for cheaper and potentially during the battle from your trash, which is this is main flash. So like with the bird, you can use it. This one you don't use as much in this build because of it's only this one. But let's just jump over to Tyson's build here. So going over to Tyson's build, I'd say, and also I will say this is a 60 card list too, which is a little bit silly for what it is. I'm really surprised it was able to be as consistent as you needed to be with 60 cards, but if you have a lot of cards you want to run, 60 is the way. But here is also Tyson's list here. Tyson did get top 32 with this list, and this was a 52 card list, so definitely both players deciding, you know what, there's not 50 is not enough room for this deck. We gotta add a little bit more into it, and some choices here, especially not having like the big white package, but using the Gun Knight Heavy Barrel for when destroyed by an opponent, and this is any level, it doesn't matter which level you are. Select one of your opponent's spirit with when summoned and return to the bottom of their deck. So really good against like purple or even just like a lot of colors with good when summons to get them off the board after they're used. Kind of a stopgap for that, which is really nice. And honestly, like you'll see, like there's a lot of the similar cards for here too. The big difference is like you're also running more of the magic cards. You're running them at way less ratios of 1, 1, 1, and 1, but they are existing in this deck. You're also running Netherworld Depths, which is one of my favorite nexuses, and I think a lot of other people's. It gets a lot of value throughout some of these games, and also just prevents your opponent from swinging sometimes because they just don't want to give you card draw, which is nice. And just kind of everything else that goes with it. Gives a cost reduction to core theft as well, I guess, if that comes up. It probably doesn't, but it could. So anyways, this is the Fabled Beast list. I think Fabled Beast is viable. I don't think it's the most viable deck in the format. And maybe it could just be a lot of people weren't on it. If more people were on it, they might do better. But I think it's an interesting kind of deck. It's one that I want to get more experience with, especially since yellow is not like I tend to gravitate towards decks that aren't doing as well, and I want to see if I can do anything with this one either. But congrats again to both of our yellow players, Admassu and Tyson, for their top 8 and top 32 finishes respectively. And then going right along, we do have next up, this is Daniel with their purple. I call it Soul Control because it's fun to say, but that is probably what it is. Generically, the top end is some kind of version of King Curse Dragon, Bacchus, and also the Pentacles. So it's kind of some tails there. Also like Purple Smoke Valleys in the deck, and just the idea that a lot of cards that not necessarily are curse focused, but more focus on moving cores to get the destruction effects from there, which is really, really strong, but also very interactable. There's a lot of ways to side and kind of negate what this deck wants to do. This is pretty similar to the deck that I was running, honestly. Honestly, like this is very, very close to the deck that I was running. I was probably 40 out of 50 of these cards I was also running at the same time. So I do think there is some hope for this deck to continue doing well. The only issue that I really find is that white is a really, really hard matchup for this deck. The fact that they have as much protection as they do mean it's really kind of difficult for you to get your combos off. The best way to do it is Dark Bishop, Baculus, and Curse Dragon, obviously using both. He gets a pretty big board clear for anything that doesn't have the full effect. But I also think that there are some ways for purple to kind of tech against this, like with Maduke, which we'll talk about a little bit later too. But in general, I really do like purple. It's my favorite color in this deck and in this game right now. I think it has a lot of potential. You just got to be careful about all the fun little counterplays a lot of people are going to be able to play and use against this deck, which is a real shame. But anyways, that is the list there, and congrats again to Daniel for their finish. Next up, we have our next top. The rest of these are going to be top 32. That's the last top 16 list we're going to look at. But this is Rex Mendoza's white aggro, and we do have a couple of these in this top 32 here. I think and we're going to make sure that the dual gun here is our big bad boy, but honestly it's really strong for what it is. It does get some bodies out for pretty cheap, especially like Bullet Ray is pretty silly for what it is. You put 2 cores on it and it just caps out, but it's a 5k, which is very strong. In general, 3k is like the magic number for this game, just because like Burning Force is as popular as it is. So any kind of creature, or spirit that can get over that 3k easily is really nice. So that can now include like Automatic Gunner for 3 cores. You're a 4k. It's also a free body. Satellite Falcon for 3 cores, you're a 4k, and then also the Heavy Tank Curiosity, which for 2 cores becomes a 4k as well. And when your Mecha Spirits will be destroyed by your opponent's destruction effects, they remain in the field exhausted instead, which is just either attack step, which is really good. It's Mecha, so it's the Gunner, the Satellite Falcon itself. Yeah, probably itself. It's just these 3, and then also the Derm Dino. These 2 don't really matter as much, but being able to get this kind of protection is kind of nice, which includes itself for only 2, which is kind of neat. What else we got? Valkyrie Mist to bounce back, so a really good tempo card. Snow Librarian, place a core from your trash into your reserve. If you place a soul core from your reserve with this, it gets plus 3k. So being able to just get like a core back is great, and also get the soul core back, which is great, which means that you can use it for suppression if you really need to, which sometimes I think that would come up too. But in general, this is a really good like value-based deck. You're able to put a lot of pressure on your opponent very quickly. Regain is also very good too, to be able to refresh something that's not attacking, so it can be used for offense and defense. And sometimes you just have Fantech Elk to get that last bit of damage if you really need it. So Anyways, congrats to Rex on this deck and their finish, and I'm probably going to have to test this one out more. This is definitely a list that, or like kind of idea of a deck that I didn't think was going to do very well at this event, and I was super duper wrong. It was just me. So anyways, we do have next John Chaney's Purple Curse, and I was talking about Maduke a little bit ago for like the white matchup for the Soul Control variant, and this card definitely kind of fixes a lot of that issue. So the fact that you do have Blood Curse, so when this would be destroyed by your opponent, you may place one card from your opponent's life and one card from the spirit instead into their trash to keep it on the field refreshed. So pretty much what this means is that you're not really afraid of attacking with this card into white, because even if they block it, it just means that and they have a potential to destroy you, you can just use your Blood Curse instead. And this just means that it won't get destroyed. It just instead gets the effect of doing that one bit of little damage. So if you have stuff with Curse 2 and you get 6 cores, which 6 cores is a little bit much on this, but then you can give all your spirits with Curse, Blood Curse as well. So that does mean that let's say you have like a little Camelot Knight with your little Soul Core there. You do have this too. You get the attack with it, and then one core from your opponent's life and one from the spirit. So let's say you have 2 cores on this. You attack, they try to block it, it dies, and then instead of dying, you just use Blood Curse, and you get the effect there too. So it keeps it on the field refreshed. So I think you can just keep swinging with Camelot Knight. And as long as you have cores to remove from it, when attacking, you get to keep using the effect, which is nice. And kind of like the thing about white, like you have a bunch of big blockers, you're like, oh, finally, like some good blockers to attack into. This could be very dangerous and kind of get there. So honestly, I think this is a good tech for white, and if anyone's playing purple, you definitely want to have this in the sideboard for that matchup. I think that does help it a lot too. But in general, the rest of it is pretty close to what we do have for the generic kind of purple Soul Control. Purple just has like a lot of good cards that you put in the deck no matter what. I will say there's just more of an emphasis on Curse in general. So the Assassin, the Okapandal, and just Camelot Knight and Aggro. So. And also the Quetzalcoatl, which also gets you, this doesn't have Curse or Blood Curse, but it does help you recycle your cards with it, which is kind of nice. So anyways, that is the list here. This is John's top 32 list. And next up we have Jesse. Yeah, we do have Jesse's list here. And so this is Purple Aggro. Which I did do an interview with him. I haven't put up on the channel yet. Well, I should in the next couple of days, though, if you guys are interested for his thoughts on it. But honestly, this is a really cool list. And when I felt like I learned a lot when he was going over the list and the choices and kind of everything else for this one. But it's really interesting for what it is. You just kind of do a lot of aggressive plays. You're aggressive with your cards. Like you draw with Assassin, you attack with your Demo Bones. And the Rotting Swamp is really kind of interesting in this matchup too. And I like what his kind of consensus was. It was like, you know what? So many of these matchups, I try to set up my Netherworld Depths or like the Poison Swamp and like the more Soul Control. And before I get to draw a card with it, I have to, like, they destroy it, they interact with it, or they make it very hard for me like to remove cores or anything else. Like all of these, both those cards depend on my opponent letting me draw cards by playing into it, kind of thing. And so Rotting Swamp is kind of like the opposite. So when one of my spirits is destroyed, I get to draw a card, which means that this is a lot easier to do. Obviously, it comes at a cost of like it being a cycle instead of it being like you get a +1 for something else. But this is still, it seems like very strong for what you're doing. It's during your attack step, so you can even procket yourself with Dread Knight Nemesis 2. And like when you're attacking with a lot of these weenies, your opponent's gonna have to block with them eventually. So just getting some free cycle, I think, is great. And then you can even double up if they have to block it. You get the destroy effect and also the Netherworld Depth. So if that happens, you get that double up, which is really nice. And also the Abandoned Guillotine. So just giving stuff +2k for your shadows, which there are quite a few shadows in this one. But also, if none of your opponent's spirits are exhausted, select one of them, remove all but one of its cores and place in their opponent's reserve during my start step. So it just means like if your opponent's not like attacking with anything, which is pretty common for like white as well, this can be a really good card for that. And also it's just Nexus for you to set up, and you need a lot of Nexuses for the destruction that they have. But I don't know. I think this is a cool deck. I need to test it out myself, honestly, and it looks like it can be really obnoxious and very powerful, which is great. So congrats again to Jesse there. And then next up, we do have our purple-red Nova Curse list, which is very interesting. So this is Zvinkov's list here. And this is something I've been honestly theory crafting myself. And the whole thing is that, oh, Volcanic Canyon is great. It draws you cards. Oh, and you have to discard a card. Oh, Beldegor loves being in the trash. That is it. That is the only thing that made me think about this deck, and that it's kind of nice. And you can kind of go and run with it too. So I do like the idea that what you do have the Volcanic Canyon, you have the Flamefish if you need like something to just kind of hold your Soul Core, and also offer red reductions later, which includes like Starblast Draw, which honestly red has a really good draw engine, and purple sometimes just does need to just draw 3 or 4 cards. So Starblast is really good for that. You know, you're playing Burning Force anyway, so you better get it. You know, like, why not have some better ways to do it? Andromeda is great. Blazing Board for 4, being able to draw a card is still good too. And then you also do have the Siegwurm Nova. You aren't running any ways to get the Ascend besides using his own effect on himself with a second copy of it, which is not likely, but is possible for this deck, especially since you are using Blazing Board to maybe recycle one that you got rid of earlier. But in general, I like what this deck kind of accomplishes. You can also, again, use the Ascend on the Baculus or even your Cursed Dragon if needed, which I'm sure came up instead of just the Andromeda. So I do think there's a lot of synergies between the two different decks. Again, Baculus Cursed Dragon is a combo, but Baculus into Nova is pretty much the same combo when you really think about it. It just gets the destruction on the attack instead of like the one summon. You don't also get the core ramp from this either, but that, or at least the core ramp that this card you don't get it from Nova. But anyways, I think this is a really cool, strong deck. I really want to test this out myself, and it's something I've been tinkering in the back of my mind for a little bit, so I'm happy to see that it did get a top 32 finish here as well. So congrats again to Zhivko for their finish. And then next up we have this, this is I call this a red Nebula Dragon. I'm not really sure what this is. This is like the weirdest deck that we've got today. It looked really interesting. It's not like a really Nova deck because you're really just teching the 1 copies and 2. Like, this deck's running more Novas, right? And it's just like I really don't know how to think about this deck. This is Abram Rios' top 32 list, and it's a real doozy for me. I don't really get it and how it's supposed to work. This does do 2 damage because if it does have the Soul Core, it does count as 2 red symbols, which counts for reduction, but this is only when the spirit attacks, which I guess this reduction can be used during the battle step the flash step for some flash magic as well. But this also can do 2 damage. So if your opponent has Ice Shield up and they're at 2, you can use this and attack, and if it does damage, you go from 2 to 0 and you just win the game there too. So there's some potential cheese for it to do some damage. But I really don't. This one baffles me that this one I just don't see it. I don't see what this deck is trying to accomplish. It just seems very, very interesting for me on that one too. But that I think is it for this one, and I think that's all the deck list, right? Yeah, that is all of them there. So again, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you've made it this far, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. I'm exhausted over here. It took a lot of work not only to record this, but everything else, and I'm just ready to go to bed as well. So that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll catch you all next time.